Looking to buy a digital camera, but can't afford a new DSLR or mirrorless camera? Why not buy a used digital camera? In this video, I'm going to tell you about the Nikon D7100, an APS-C 24 megapixel DSLR that was introduced in early 2013. I think it's still a great camera today. So let's get into some of the features of the camera, and I will show you some images. So the 7100 has 51 autofocus points, including 15 cross-type points. It also will focus down to -2 EV, not as great as the latest cameras, but it's adequate for most available light photography. It has a 3.2-inch LCD on the back. It doesn't tilt. It's not a touchscreen like the more modern ones. It has a built-in flash with commander mode. So it will work with the Nikon flash system to fire remote flashes with line of sight. It will fire at 6 frames per second. And the one negative on this camera, at least the biggest negative on this camera, is the buffer. If you're shooting continuous, the buffer will fill when shooting RAW when you reach 6 frames. However, if you're shooting JPEGs, you can get up to 50 frames before the buffer will fill. It has a standard ISO range from 100 to 6400. It has also dual SD card slots. Okay, so it will take 2 SD cards, and they could be set for overflow. So in other words, when the one card is filled, it will automatically go to the second card, or you could shoot RAW on one card and JPEG on the other card, or backup. You could shoot RAW on both, RAW and JPEG on both. So there's a lot of options with the memory cards. It also has a fully auto mode, which is great for beginners. You just set it to auto, and the camera will select your shutter speed, your aperture, your focus. It all turns this sophisticated camera basically into a point and shoot. It takes the Nikon F mount, so there are a ton of lenses available. You could even use the old AI and AIS lenses on this camera, and of course the older AF lenses will fit. You cannot use pre-AI lenses. It will damage the camera. When using these manual focus lenses, these AI and AIS lenses, you need to set in the parameters of that lens. You can set up to 9 lenses into the camera. You just need to set the focal length, for example, 50 millimeter, and the maximum aperture. And then those lenses will work in aperture priority and manual mode. You do not have program or any of the other auto exposure modes when using these manual lenses without a CPU. Okay, the newer AF lenses all have CPUs, and they will communicate fine with the camera. Now, I bought my 7100 back not long after it came out with the excellent 18 to 140 kit lens. It's better than your normal kit lens, and I used it as my primary camera for a while, and then once I got the D810, it was a backup, and it served me well over the years. When buying a used camera, just if you're buying it through eBay, just read the listing carefully. If you're buying it through one of the major retailers, such as B&H or Adorama or KEH or Roberts Camera, they provide you with a warranty, varies by company, and so you have some time to check out the camera when you receive it. One of the things I really like if you're buying a used digital camera is you can tell how many times the shutter was fired. Okay, you could request that information from the seller, or when you get the camera, you can check it out yourself. And what you'll do is you'll shoot a JPEG image, open it up in Photoshop, and go to File, Info, and Raw Data. And you will see a list of a whole bunch of data items. And you're going to look for image number. and that number will tell you how many times the shutter was fired. It cannot be reset by a user, okay, so it is accurate information. And this camera is rated at 150,000 images, shutter actuations, before failure. And that doesn't mean it's going to fail at 150,000. It means it was tested to 150,000. And 150,000 is the equivalent of about 4,100 36 exposure rolls. So, you know, if you look at a listing on eBay or you find out from a seller that it is, you know, has 50,000 actuations, well, you know, that's only 1/3 of its life. So you got a lot more life left in that camera. Now, as with most used cameras, prices vary greatly. I've seen them for $400, $300. Of course, a lot of that depends on condition. You could probably even get them for under $300. Again, just make sure you find out the number of actuations, or you have some type of a money-back guarantee. When searching for this camera online, you may see listings for 7200, the Nikon D7200. That's an updated version of this camera. Its sensor was improved slightly, so there's a little less noise in high ISO images. Also, it focuses down to -3 EV. And also, the big difference was the buffer was increased so that you could shoot up to 18 RAW frames before the buffer fills. I have used this camera for some sports, for some wildlife, and you could see this picture of the bird landing here. That was done with this camera with a 300mm lens and a 1.4 teleconverter. The bird in flight was just done with the 300 at ISO of 800. So the camera works good up until, I would say, about 1600. I compared it to my D500 at 1600, and while the D500 does have less noise at 1600, the D7100 is perfectly acceptable. These images you see here are shown at 200%. I wouldn't go above 1600 unless it's absolutely necessary, or if you're going to, these pictures, or if those pictures are going to be reproduced at a small size. Because at 3200 you do get quite a bit of noise. And of course you could try some noise reduction software, sometimes that will help, but usually it will give you a softer image. As far as the autofocus, I think it works great, you know, except for professional sports photography or small birds in flight. You know, a newer camera, of course, is going to do much better. Image quality, I'm very pleased with the image quality of this camera. I've shot it side by side along my 810. I've shot it alongside my mirrorless cameras, and you know, up to ISO 800, I don't really see much of a difference. So I think you will be very pleased with the image quality in this camera. There's absolutely no noise at 100, 200. You might see a little creeping in at 400 in the darker areas, but again, nothing objectionable. It's usable up to 1600. I believe this camera compares favorably to today's cameras for image quality, at least at the lower ISOs. No, it doesn't have the great high ISO capability of some of the newer cameras, the professional cameras, the mirrorless cameras. But unless you need to shoot at those high ISOs, I think this is a wonderful camera for a beginner or as a backup. Another thing with this camera, it will accept a grip, okay? That will give you an additional battery. It holds an additional battery, okay? And also, it will give you a vertical shutter release, a joystick on the back to select your focus points. It has duplicate control. Put that on, show you. What's nice with this grip is, of course, that it's removable. If you don't need it, if you're not going to be shooting verticals, if you don't need that extra battery power, if you don't want the additional weight, you can just take it off. Now, another thing with the battery grip, of course, it's doubling your battery capacity, and that will almost double the number of frames you'll be able to shoot before replacing the battery. Now, single battery without the battery grip, you're going to get upwards of 1,000 frames before needing to replace it. So obviously with the battery grip, you're going to nearly double that. Now, this camera is loaded with features. In fact, the instruction manual is, I believe it's 355 pages. So, you know, there's a lot going on with this camera. There's a lot of features. There's a lot of controls. And it's very customizable. Okay, so I guess that's it for this video. If you have any questions, please email me or leave them in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And tap that bell so you'll be alerted anytime I come out with a new video. And I usually come out with a new one every Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. So thanks for watching.